So the way that the MIA table of contents is organized is that there are 6 different stages, including stage 0, and then a tool section, and then an extra section. So the deal with the stages is that stage 0 is just an introductory stage that goes into basic background information about the method, but then stages 1 through 5 each correspond to a level of ability on the way to developing proficiency in a foreign language. So these are the same basic 5 levels that I talked about in the introduction video. And like I said then, these levels aren't necessarily inherent in reality. They're kind of just arbitrary delineations that I made up for the pragmatic purpose of making it easier to understand all the different techniques and when you should apply which ones, and also to make it easier to understand your own progress and how close you are to your goal. Now, the idea is that after you will complete a stage, you'll have the corresponding level of ability. So, like I said in the introduction video, the 5 levels are dabbling in the language, survival level, functional, fluent, and professionally competent. So after you finish stage 3, you should be functional in the language. After you complete stage 4, you should be fluent, and so on. Now, the one exception to this is that there's no real end to stage 5 because it's the final stage and there's always ways that you can continue to improve your language ability. But after doing stage 5 for 6 months to a year, you can expect to have a pretty solid, professionally competent level of ability in the language. So in a way, reaching stage 5 is kind of like getting your black belt in a martial art, where in a sense, it shows that you have achieved mastery, and in another sense, it's just the beginning because you can continue to get better and better and better. Now, beyond just the stages, the tools section is just going to have various kind of programmatic tools and links, like different things that are useful for optimizing your immersion or calibrating your spaced repetition system and so on, things like that. And these are basically tools that have the potential to be useful no matter what stage you're currently at. And then the extra section is kind of just a catch-all category for miscellaneous stuff that's not too important, and I didn't think it would be worth putting it in one of the main stages, but is still relevant enough or, interesting, entertaining enough that I wanted it to be somewhere on the site. So it might be interesting to check out the extra section. Now, within each of the main 5 stages, there's going to be, an introduction that just talks about, the main techniques you're going to be using and how you know when you have completed the stage. But then there's also going to be 3 main sections of content within each stage, and that's going to be theory, practice, and psychology. So the idea with the theory is that it's, like I talked about in the introduction video, the kind of theoretical models and ideas about why the techniques actually work and how language acquisition works in general. Because like I explained in the introduction video, if you were a bodybuilder, for example, having a solid theoretical understanding of the biology behind muscle growth is going to allow you to work out much more effectively and also stay motivated before you have really solid results. And then we have the practice section, which is just going to be going into all the nitty-gritty of how you actually execute the techniques. How exactly do you make flashcards? How do you review flashcards? How do you immerse? Where do you find things to immerse with? What do you pay attention to? Pretty much all the questions about the actual execution. And then the psychology section is going to have content that, helps you stay motivated, helps you overcome kind of mental blockages and mental hurdles, because in a way that's the thing that trips people up the most, right? Especially in the beginning stages, just staying motivated is quite difficult. And also, as you progress through the stages, your subjective experience of learning a language might change quite drastically from stage to stage. And so I'm going to have unique kind of tips and tricks about how to stay motivated and how to manage your psychology in each stage. Now, the last thing that I wanted to touch on in this video is just kind of the idea that this site is kind of designed in a spiral. And what I mean by this is that part of the idea with practice and theory is that there's a limit of how deeply you can understand theory before you have a certain amount of practice under your belt. So in order to really understand how language acquisition works, you can't just sit and read articles about it. You actually have to have some firsthand experience. That's why there's practice and theory in each stage, is that once you have some more practice on your belt, now you can learn higher level theory. That higher level theory is going to help you practice more efficiently. Once you practice more, you can get even higher level theory. And so some of the most fundamental and important concepts and ideas about language learning are actually very multifaceted and can be understood on many different levels. And so I'm going to be kind of coming around and revisiting the same kind of ideas at deeper and subtler levels as you progress through the stages. And the other side of this is that even if you reach one of the higher stages, it can be useful to occasionally go back and consume some of the content from the earlier stages, because now that you have more practice under your belt, the old theory might actually take on totally different meanings for you, and you might get a lot more out of it than you were able to get the first time. So I recommend kind of going both directions when you consume the site. Maybe look forward every once in a while, look ahead a stage or two, consume some of that content, maybe look behind, go back and revisit some older stuff, and that should be pretty useful.